All right. I want to have a quick little conversation about social sensitivity, um, inclusive conduct, and awareness. So basically, the core principles of our company, right? We want to treat everyone with dignity and kindness. Every person matters, right? Respect differences without judgment, and always listen with empathy. Really, that's super important. Um, Make sure and avoid jokes or comments based on stereotypes, race, gender, disability, identity, all that stuff. Just keep it off your radar. Um, you don't have to understand someone's life to treat them with respect. I mean, that's really important. Kindness is free, you guys. It's powerful and it's always appropriate, right? Um, keep in mind, uh, you know, love wins, right? Kindness is love. So try and stay, really honed in on that. So there are some specific racial and cultural awareness things we need to talk about. You never want to assume somebody's background, their language, their beliefs, anything like that. Just don't make assumptions, right? Um, Avoid questions like, "Where are you from? Where are you originally from? Um, where are you really from? What's that accent? Things like that, right? You just avoid them, please. So just use inclusive language, being curious without being invasive. There are ways to talk about these things if you're really curious. It's just about your choice of how you discuss them, right? They are an individual. They're not a group. So just keep that in mind, right? Um, Celebrate their differences, right? You don't need to exoticize them, stereotype them, there's nothing exotic about anywhere else in this world. Where you are is where you are, right? Where you're from is where you're from. Don't make stereotypes, okay? We have some things that we need to think about when it comes to the LGBTQIA sensitivities, right? You need to use the pronouns that someone gives you, right? If they consider themselves as a he, a she, a them, a they, use that, right? It's very important to them. Um, Avoid, assumptions about somebody's partner, right? Their identity, their appearance. You don't want to be like, assume that they're one way just because of the way they dress, right? Um, if you make a mistake, correct it politely, right? And move on. You don't need to linger on a subject. You're human too, right? You don't need to, you know, continue apologizing. So just keep that in mind. Use inclusive words like partner instead of assuming gender roles. Okay, these are really important things. Okay, this is their life. This is how they chose to live it, and we really, really want to be inclusive. Okay. Um, So there's some things to be, considerate of for autistic people, people with developmentally, disabilities. Um, Something you really want to keep in mind is to speak calmly and clearly, right? If something came out wrong, make sure and correct yourself. Um, be patient. Give extra time for responses, right? They don't always respond right away. Okay. Try and avoid loud noises, strong smells, an unexpected touch, right? You might touch them on the shoulder and and kind of freak them out, right? Um, Always respect their routines and ask before moving personal items, right? If they need to interrupt you to do something, I know it's inconvenient, but allow them to interrupt you and do something, okay? But mostly just listen to their caregivers. Usually people in these situations have somebody helping them out. They see them every day, okay? They're gonna give you tips and just follow those tips. Um, so as far as gender and identity goes, we really can't assume gender based on appearance or voice, okay? Use neutral terms until you're sure, right? They, them, folks, everyone, right? You don't need to specify gender. There's no point really, okay? When unsure, just ask respectfully, right? What name or pronoun do you prefer, right? I can't really think of many situations where you're really going to need to know, right? If you say, she and they look uncomfortable, then maybe it's okay to add time to ask. But still, even then, maybe it's best just to avoid it. So, disabilities, right? So, it's really important to speak to the person and not just their assistant or caregiver, right? They're a person too. They can often hear you. They certainly can pick up a vibe or understand that you're talking about them, right? But offer help, but wait for permission before stepping into a situation like that, right? Don't assume because the caregiver said you need to clean their room that you don't have to ask them, because you do, right? They're just like any other person. Don't assume somebody needs help, right? They might be very independent, right? But if you have Down syndrome, sometimes your face looks different than what you can actually perform as far as up here. So don't assume they need help, right? Make space for mobility devices, right? If you have your tote out, don't leave it in the walkway so they can get by without having to ask, okay? That's really important. We do create a safe and inclusive workplace, right? That is very, very important, company value that we have. So if you hear something, speak up. Disrespectful comments about your coworkers, your friends out there, silence can be harmful. You don't have to stay quiet, okay? So make sure and speak up if you hear them speaking with a coworker that's disrespectful, because sometimes it's really hard. You start to question yourself, well, should I just, take that? No, your teammates are going to need your support, okay? So do that with dignity, with professionalism. Inclusion's everybody's job every day, okay? Ostracization is just plain shitty. When everybody in an office or everybody in a work environment just leaves somebody out of everything, it feels terrible, right? You don't want to work there anymore. And that's not the way we do business, okay? The goal isn't to avoid people who are different. It's to welcome them. That's what we do. We're going to see everybody from every class. And, quite frankly, your job depends on it.